I haven't had sex in 6 months, the Japanese prison of war woman said to the virgin black American soldier, September 3, 1944, Manila Harbor, Philippines. The rope burns on Aya Takahashi's wrists had stopped bleeding, but the shame had not. She stood among 47 other Japanese prisoners on the deck of the USS Callaway, watching the Philippine coastline disappear into the morning haze. 3 days earlier, she had been a volunteer nurse with the Imperial Japanese Army's 14th Area Army. Now she was prisoner number 783, property of the United States Armed Forces. The propaganda officers in Tokyo had prepared her for this moment. They had shown films of American savagery, Chinese villages burned, British prisoners tortured. The instructors had been specific about what happened to Japanese women captured by American forces. Death was preferable to capture. The cyanide capsule she had carried in her uniform pocket was gone now, confiscated during the initial search. She had failed even in that final duty. Aya had volunteered for service in 1942, driven by the same fervor that swept through Japan after Pearl Harbor. Her father, a postal clerk in Osaka, had been proud. Her mother had wept, but said nothing. The training had been brief. 6 weeks of basic medical instruction, 2 weeks of military protocol, 1 week of indoctrination about the enemy. The Americans were monsters. This fact was repeated until it became as natural as breathing. The reality of war arrived quickly in the Philippines. The hospital unit she served operated in constant retreat. They moved from Manila to the mountains, then deeper into the jungle. Supplies dwindled, medicine ran out. They began using boiled tree bark for infections. By August, they were amputating limbs with carpenter's saws. The wounded men screamed in languages she barely understood, dialects from northern Japan that sounded foreign to her Osaka ears. The end came on August 31st during an American advance near Clark Field. Artillery shells walked through the jungle, methodical and precise. Each explosion brought the line closer. The hospital staff had no weapons, no escape route, no options. When the American soldiers appeared through the smoke, Aya had expected immediate execution. Instead, they offered water. That first moment of confusion still haunted her. An American medic, his face covered in dust and sweat, had handed her a canteen. She had stared at it, unable to reconcile the object with everything she had been taught. Enemies did not offer water. Monsters did not show concern when she stumbled during the march to the collection point. The cognitive dissonance was physically painful. The processing center at Manila was chaos. Thousands of Japanese prisoners arrived daily as American forces swept through Luzon. They were photographed, documented, searched, and sorted. Medical personnel received different treatment than combat soldiers. This distinction surprised Aya. She had assumed all prisoners would face the same fate. The propaganda had never mentioned administrative procedures or paperwork. It had only promised brutality and death. Now, standing on the deck of an American transport ship, Aya confronted a disturbing truth. The Americans were efficient. They were organized. They treated prisoners according to protocols that seemed designed for long-term custody, not immediate execution. This realization was more terrifying than the expected violence. If they planned to keep prisoners alive, it meant they were confident of victory. It meant Japan was losing. The voyage to America would take 3 weeks. Aya stood at the rail, watching the water, and wondered what new impossibilities awaited her in the land of the enemy. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. September 5th, 1944, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Sergeant Samuel Turner stood at attention in the commandant's office, trying to ignore the sweat running down his back despite the cool autumn air. Colonel Harrison sat behind his desk, reviewing personnel files with the methodical precision of a man who had spent 30 years in the Army. The silence stretched until Sam wondered if the colonel had forgotten he was there. Samuel Turner had joined the Army in 1942, 3 months after Pearl Harbor. He was 20 years old, fresh from high school in Birmingham, Alabama, where he had learned that patriotism and citizenship did not guarantee equality. The recruiting office had been segregated. The training camp had been segregated. The barracks, the mess halls, the latrines, all separated by an invisible line that everyone acknowledged, but no one discussed officially. The Army needed men. That fact transcended race, at least temporarily. Sam excelled in basic training. He scored high on marksmanship tests, learned regulations quickly, demonstrated leadership potential. His sergeants wrote positive evaluations. None of it changed the fundamental reality. He was a black soldier in a white man's army, fighting for a country that treated him as less than fully human. Camp McCoy specialized in processing and housing prisoners of war. The facility held Germans, Italians, and now Japanese prisoners. Sam's unit, the 577th Military Police Battalion, was assigned guard duty. It was not glamorous work. It was not combat. But it was necessary, and Sam tried to find dignity in necessity. Colonel Harrison finally looked up from the files. "Turner, you speak any Japanese?" "No, sir." "German? Italian?" "No, sir." "Well, neither does anyone else in this outfit." The colonel sighed. "We've got 200 Japanese prisoners arriving next week. Most of them are medical personnel captured in the Philippines, including 40 women." Sam kept his expression neutral, but his mind raced. Female prisoners were
rare. The implications created complications nobody wanted to discuss. "These prisoners expect to be executed," Colonel Harrison continued. "Their propaganda told them we're savages. They think we'll torture them, starve them. Worse. Your job is to prove them wrong. We follow Geneva Convention protocols. We treat prisoners with dignity. We show them that American values mean something, even in war. Understood?"
"Yes, sir."
"Turner, I'm assigning you to the women's compound specifically because of your record. You've never had a disciplinary issue. Your evaluations are excellent. But I need you to understand something." The colonel leaned forward. "Some of the other guards won't like this assignment. Some of them think black soldiers shouldn't be guarding anyone, especially not women. You'll face comments, maybe worse. Can you handle that?" Sam thought about Birmingham. He thought about the separate water fountains, the back of the bus, the signs that said, "Colored," over bathroom doors. He thought about his mother's warnings to never look a white woman in the eye, never speak unless spoken to, never forget your place. "I can handle it, sir." The assignment was complicated by factors the colonel did not mention. Sam carried his own burden of propaganda. The Japanese were portrayed as subhuman in American media. Newsreels showed them as fanatics, insects to be exterminated. The bombing campaigns deliberately targeted civilian populations. The war in the Pacific was more brutal, more racial, more absolute than the European theater. Yet Sam understood something most white soldiers did not. He knew what it meant to be considered less than human. He knew the weight of systematic dehumanization. When white America called the Japanese Japs and yellow monkeys, Sam heard echoes of words directed at his own people. The hatred sounded familiar. His friend, Private Leroy Jenkins, found him later at the barracks. "Heard you got assigned to the Jap compound." "Japanese compound," Sam corrected quietly. Leroy raised an eyebrow. "Man, they're the enemy." "So were the Germans. We still call them Germans, not Krauts." "That's different."
"Is it?" The conversation died there. Sam lay on his bunk that night, thinking about the prisoners who would arrive next week. Women who expected death.
Soldiers who had been taught that Americans were monsters. People shaped by the same propaganda machinery that made white Americans fear black men walking down their streets. He wondered if understanding enemy propaganda made him better suited for this assignment, or worse. September 12, 1944. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The transport trucks arrived at 11 in the morning, carrying women who looked like they had not slept in days. Aya Takahashi stepped down from the truck bed, her legs unsteady after the long journey from California. The Wisconsin landscape seemed impossible. Green grass, trees with leaves turning gold and red, buildings that looked permanent, not temporary. Nothing about this place resembled a prison camp from the propaganda films. Sam stood at parade rest near the compound entrance, watching the new arrivals with careful neutrality. His instructions were clear: maintain discipline, show no emotion, follow protocols. But the women climbing down from the trucks challenged every expectation. They were exhausted, frightened, and trying desperately to maintain dignity, despite circumstances designed to strip it away. The September sun was unusually hot for Wisconsin. The women had been traveling for 6 hours without water. Camp regulations required processing before prisoners could access facilities. Sam watched as they lined up for roll call, swaying slightly in formation. One woman near the front looked ready to collapse. The processing took 3 hours. Photographs, fingerprints, medical examinations, assignment to barracks. The women moved through each station with mechanical compliance, their faces carefully blank. Sam recognized that expression. It was the same look his mother wore when shopping in white stores, when dealing with white officials, when navigating any situation where showing emotion could be dangerous. By 2 in the afternoon, the women stood in formation on the parade ground. The sun beat down without mercy. No shade, no water. The camp commandant believed in discipline through discomfort. Sam stood at his post, watching them wilt. The woman at the end of the front row started to sway. Sam saw it happening. She was small, perhaps 5 feet tall, her uniform hanging loose on a frame that had lost too much weight. Her eyes rolled back. She began to fall. Sam moved before thinking. He caught her before she hit the ground, one hand supporting her back, the other behind her knees. She weighed almost nothing. For a moment, the entire formation froze, guards staring, prisoners staring. Everyone waiting to see what would happen when a black soldier touched a Japanese woman. "She needs water," Sam said quietly to the sergeant in charge. "Regulations say no water until after." "She needs water now." Sam did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The sergeant hesitated, then nodded. Sam carried the unconscious woman to the shade of a nearby building. He retrieved his canteen, unscrewed the cap, lifted her head gently. When she began to wake, confused and disoriented, he held the canteen to her lips. "Drink," he said softly. Slowly. Aya's eyes focused on the face above her. A black man in an American uniform. This was not what the propaganda had shown. The instructors in Tokyo had been specific about American soldiers. They were white. They were brutal. They were rapists and murderers. This man was being gentle. His hands supported her carefully, like she was something fragile that might break. She drank. The water tasted better than anything she could remember. When she tried to sit up, he helped her, then stepped back to a respectful distance. "Thank you," she whispered. In Japanese, then realized he would not understand. Sam nodded anyway. "You're welcome." The moment lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Then the sergeant called Sam back to formation, and the processing continued. But something had changed. The other women had seen. They had watched a guard show mercy when regulations demanded indifference. They had witnessed kindness when propaganda promised only cruelty. That evening, as the women settled into their barracks, Aya sat on her bunk and touched her wrists where his hands had supported her. The gesture had been so careful, so deliberate in its gentleness. It contradicted everything she had been taught to expect. The propaganda officer in Manila had shown them photographs: American soldiers standing over dead civilians, cities burned, women violated. The images were designed to ensure Japanese soldiers and civilians would fight to the death rather than surrender. Better to die with honor than face American savagery. But the man who had caught her, who had given her water, whose dark skin marked him as different from the Americans in the propaganda films, that man had not been savage. He had been kind. And that kindness was more terrifying than expected brutality, because it meant the propaganda was wrong. If the propaganda was wrong about this, what else was false? Aya lay awake that night, listening to the other women breathing in the darkness, and wondered what other impossibilities this American prison would reveal. September 15th, 1944. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The women's barracks held conversations that the guards could not hear. Aya sat on her bunk, mending a tear in her uniform with thread salvaged from a blanket. Around her, 47 women processed the impossible reality of American captivity through whispered debates that grew heated despite the need for quiet. Mitsuko Sato occupied the bunk beside Aya's. She was 32, older than most of the nurses, a veteran of the campaign in China before the Philippines. Mitsuko had seen combat. She had treated soldiers whose wounds defied medical training. She had watched the Imperial Army's retreat turn into chaos. Now she struggled to reconcile her experience with the treatment they received as prisoners. "They fed us rice today," Mitsuko said quietly. "Real rice, not the scraps we survived on in the jungle. How do we explain this?" "We cannot," Aya replied, focusing on her stitching. "Nothing here follows the pattern we were taught." Another woman, Keiko Yamada, leaned forward from her bunk. "My cousin was captured by the Americans in 1942. Her family received notification that she died in custody. But these conditions," she gestured at the barracks. Electric lights, running water, bunks with mattresses. "This is not a death camp." "Maybe they are fattening us for something worse," Mitsuko suggested, but her voice lacked conviction. The daily routine at Camp McCoy followed strict protocols. Wake at 6, morning roll call, breakfast in the mess hall, work assignments, lunch, more work, dinner, evening roll call, lights out at 9. The schedule was rigid, but the treatment within that structure surprised them constantly. The mess hall served 3 meals daily. The portions were adequate, sometimes generous. The quality exceeded what they had eaten as active-duty military personnel in the Philippines. This abundance disturbed the women more than scarcity would have. Enemies did not feed prisoners better than they fed their own soldiers. The work assignments were equally confusing. Aya was assigned to the camp hospital, assisting American medical staff with routine care. She expected to be given the worst tasks. Instead, she found herself doing actual nursing work. The American doctors treated her as a colleague, not a prisoner. They asked her opinion on patient care. They taught her new techniques. This collaboration violated everything the propaganda had promised. Americans were supposed to view Japanese as subhuman. They were supposed to deny prisoners any dignity or purpose. Yet here she was, being trained in advanced medical procedures by the same people who were supposed to be torturing her. "I think it is a trick," Mitsuko said during one of their evening conversations. "They want us to become comfortable. Then they will betray us." "For what purpose?" Keiko asked. "If they wanted to kill us, we would already be dead. If they wanted to torture us, why provide medical care and adequate food?"
Propaganda value, Mitsuko insisted. They will photograph us looking healthy and well-fed, then use those images to convince other Japanese to surrender. Aya considered this explanation. It made tactical sense, but it did not explain the small kindnesses that served no propaganda purpose. The guard who had given her water, the doctor who said please and thank you when giving her instructions, the cook who remembered she could not eat certain foods and adjusted her meals accordingly. These gestures were too small for propaganda, too personal, too human. The most disturbing realization came during a conversation with one of the American nurses, a woman named Dorothy who spoke broken Japanese, learned from a missionary childhood in Kobe. Dorothy asked Aya about her family, her home, her life before the war. She asked with genuine curiosity, as if Aya were a person with a history worth knowing. "My father is a postal worker," Aya found herself saying, "in Osaka. He stamps letters and sorts packages. He wanted me to be a teacher. I wanted to be a nurse." Dorothy nodded. "My father is a postal worker too, in Minnesota. He wanted me to be a teacher. I wanted to be a nurse." She smiled. "Maybe we are not so different." That conversation haunted Aya. She repeated it to Mitsuko that evening, trying to process the implications. "It is a trick," Mitsuko said firmly. "They want you to forget who you are, who they are. They want you to betray your country through sentiment." "Is it betrayal to acknowledge that our enemies are human?" "Yes." Mitsuko's voice was hard. "Yes, it is." But Aya saw doubt in her friend's eyes. Mitsuko had eaten the American rice. She had accepted medical treatment from American doctors. She had followed American orders without resistance. Every day of compliance was a small betrayal of the propaganda that demanded they choose death over capture. They were alive. The Americans had allowed them to remain alive. This fact alone contradicted everything Tokyo had taught them. And if that fundamental truth was false, what else might be lies? September 28, 1944. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The evening air carried the first hints of autumn cold. Aya sat on a bench outside the barracks during the brief recreation period, watching the sunset over Wisconsin farmland that looked nothing like Japan. 3 weeks of captivity had eroded her certainty about everything, except her growing confusion. Sam walked his patrol route along the compound fence, maintaining the prescribed distance from prisoners. Regulations were clear about fraternization. Guards and prisoners were not to speak except for official purposes. No personal conversations. No unnecessary contact. The rules existed to maintain discipline and prevent the complications that arose when enemies became human to each other. But Aya had been watching him. She noticed how he walked his rounds with careful attention, checking fences and gates with thoroughness that other guards skipped. She noticed how he carried himself differently than the white guards, a subtle wariness that suggested he understood what it meant to be watched constantly. She noticed that he never spoke harshly to the prisoners, never used the crude slurs that some guards employed casually. The bench where she sat was technically within bounds. Sam's patrol route passed close enough for conversation if someone were inclined to violate regulations. Aya found herself inclined. "Guard," she called softly in careful English. "A moment, please." Sam stopped, maintaining proper distance. "Problem?" "No problem. Question." Aya struggled with the English words. Her education had included some language training, but speaking remained difficult. "You are different, other guards. They look at us like we are insects. You do not." "That's not a question." "Why? Why do you not hate us?" Sam should have walked away. The conversation violated a dozen regulations. But something in her voice suggested this was not idle curiosity. This was a woman trying to reconcile impossible contradictions, and Sam understood that struggle intimately.
I know what hate looks like, he said carefully. I grew up with it, directed at me, because of my skin. So I recognize propaganda when I see it. The things they say about the Japanese, about you being less than human. I have heard those same words about my people. Aya processed this slowly. You are hated? In America?
But you are American soldier. Being American does not mean being treated equal. Being a soldier does not change the color of my skin. The honesty surprised her. American propaganda, as shown in captured materials, portrayed America as a unified nation of equality and freedom. This guard was suggesting that propaganda was also false. Everything is lies, Aya said quietly. Tokyo lies. Washington lies. How do we know what is true? We look at actions, not words. Are you being treated the way Tokyo said you would be? No. We are fed, given medical care, allowed dignity. This contradicts all expectations. Sam nodded. And are we the monsters your propaganda described? Aya hesitated, then made a decision that she knew was dangerous. I must tell you something. It has been troubling me, making me unable to sleep. What? I have not had sex in 6 months. The words came out in a rush, raw and unfiltered. Before camp in Philippines, there was man, officer. We thought we would marry after war. He was killed in August. Since then, nothing. No touch, no intimacy, no human connection that is not duty or fear. I am prisoner. I am enemy. But I am also woman who is lonely and scared and tired of pretending I am only soldier. The confession hung in the air between them. Sam had not expected this vulnerability. His training had not prepared him for enemy prisoners admitting to desires and fears that had nothing to do with warfare. I should not have spoken, Aya said quickly, seeing his shock. Forgive me. I forget myself. No. Sam's voice was soft. No, I understand. I am also lonely, also scared, also tired of pretending. He paused, choosing words carefully. I am virgin, 22 years old, and never been with woman. In Birmingham, where I am from, black man who looks at white woman wrong can be killed. Japanese women, Chinese women, any women, all forbidden to me by law or custom. Army is segregated. There are no black women here. So I am also 6 months without touch, without human connection that is not duty or fear. They stood in silence, processing what they had shared. The admission created a dangerous intimacy, a recognition that beneath uniforms and national identities lived people with needs that war could not eliminate. We are not supposed to be human to each other, Aya finally said. No, we are not. But we are. Yes, we are. Sam resumed his patrol, leaving Aya on the bench. But something fundamental had shifted. They had acknowledged each other's humanity in a way that transcended propaganda. They had admitted to vulnerabilities that soldiers were supposed to suppress. They had created a tiny space of truth in a world built on lies. That night, Aya lay awake, thinking about the guard with dark skin who understood loneliness. She thought about his admission of virginity, shared with honesty that suggested trust. She thought about how he had not looked at her with disgust or lust, only with recognition of shared isolation. The propaganda had prepared her for brutality. It had not prepared her for this quiet understanding between enemies who discovered they were both human beings, lonely and afraid, trying to find dignity in circumstances that denied it. October 5th, 1944, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Aya stood in the camp hospital, watching Sergeant Sam Turner distribute extra blankets to the prisoners in the sick ward. This simple act violated no regulations. Winter was coming to Wisconsin. Extra blankets were authorized. But the way he moved through the ward, checking on each patient with genuine concern, challenged everything Aya had been taught about American soldiers. The propaganda films in Tokyo had been specific. Americans cared nothing for enemy lives. They would let prisoners freeze, starve, die without medical attention. Yet here was this black soldier, ensuring each woman had adequate warmth for the approaching cold season. He asked questions. He listened to complaints. He made notes to report equipment failures and supply shortages. Mitsuko watched from her hospital bed, recovering from pneumonia. She had been assigned to the sick ward 3 days earlier. The American doctors had given her sulfa drugs, bed rest, and constant monitoring, treatment that exceeded what Japanese military hospitals provided to their own wounded. "He does this every morning," Mitsuko said quietly in Japanese. "Checks every prisoner, brings extra supplies when he can. Yesterday he smuggled in fresh fruit from the guards' mess, apples, 3 of them. He gave them to the sickest patients." "Why?" Aya asked. "What does he gain?" "Nothing. That is what troubles me." Aya had spent 2 weeks observing Sam's behavior. She watched him during morning roll calls, during work assignments, during the evening patrols when guards were supposed to maintain strict distance. He never raised his voice, never used crude language, never treated the prisoners as less than human. More disturbing, she saw him treat the white guards with the same careful neutrality he showed the prisoners. He maintained professional distance from everyone, as if he understood that trust was dangerous in a world where alliances shifted based on skin color and nationality. The hospital work gave Aya access to conversations between American staff. She heard the white doctors discussing Sam. Some praised his professionalism. Others questioned whether a black soldier should be guarding women prisoners. The racism was casual, embedded in their language like a disease they did not recognize as illness. One afternoon, Aya heard 2 white guards talking outside the supply room. "Turner's getting too friendly with the Japs," one said. "Someone should remind him he's colored. He doesn't get to act superior to anyone." "Colonel likes him, though. Says he follows regulations better than anyone." "Following regulations doesn't change what he is." Aya understood perhaps a third of the English, but she understood the tone. She had heard similar conversations in Japan about Koreans, about Chinese, about anyone who was considered less than fully Japanese. The hate sounded identical regardless of language. That evening, during recreation time, she found Sam walking his patrol. "I have a question," she said carefully. "The other guards, they dislike you?" Sam glanced at her, weighing whether to answer honestly. "Some do." "Because of skin?" "Yes." "But you are American. You wear uniform. You fight for your country. How can they hate you?" "The uniform doesn't change the color underneath. In America, being black means always being different, always being less, even when you do everything right." Aya processed this slowly. "In Japan, we are taught Americans are united, strong because of unity. This is not true?" "No, it's not true. America is divided by color, by money, by religion, by geography. We pretend to be united, but the divisions run deep." "Then why do you fight? Why do you serve country that treats you badly?" Sam was quiet for a long moment. "Because I hope it can be better. Because my people have always been here, building this country, and we deserve equality. Because fighting fascism abroad might help fight racism at home. He paused. And because refusing to serve would not change anything. It would only confirm what racist people already believe about us. Aya watched him walk away, understanding something fundamental. Sam fought for a country that denied him full humanity. She had fought for a country that taught her to deny humanity to others. They were both serving systems that required them to pretend certain truths did not exist. The next morning, Aya saw Sam sharing his lunch with an elderly prisoner who had been too sick to eat breakfast. He broke his sandwich in half, gave away the better portion, kept the smaller piece for himself. No one was watching. No one would know. He did it simply because he saw someone hungry. This casual kindness was more dangerous than propaganda. It could not be explained away as strategy or manipulation. It was genuine. It suggested that Sam helped others not because of orders or advantage, but because he believed it was right. That night, Aya lay awake, thinking about a black soldier who showed mercy to Japanese prisoners, despite facing hatred from his own countrymen. She thought about how he gave away his food, his blankets, his time. She thought about how he treated her with dignity, when regulations said he only needed to treat her correctly. The propaganda had prepared her for monsters. It had not prepared her for this quiet goodness that asked nothing in return. October 12th, 1944. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The October evening brought frost warnings and a sky so clear the stars seemed close enough to touch. Aya sat on the bench outside the barracks, wrapped in one of the extra blankets Sam had distributed. She was not supposed to be outside after evening roll call. But the guard on duty was
Private Leroy Jenkins, Sam's friend, who pretended not to see her. Sam appeared from the darkness, walking his patrol route. He should have ordered her inside. Instead, he slowed his pace, stopped at a respectful distance, and looked up at the stars. "In Birmingham, where I grew up, you could not see stars like this," he said quietly. "Too much smoke from the steel mills, too many lights from the factories. But sometimes, on clear nights, a few stars would break through." "In Osaka, also smoke," Aya replied. "Many factories, many people. Sky was always gray." They stood in silence, two people from industrial cities, watching stars that neither had seen clearly before this war separated them from home. The moment felt stolen, precious because it violated a dozen unspoken rules about fraternization and proper distance between guards and prisoners. "May I ask a personal question?" Aya said finally. "You can ask. I might not answer." "When you were young, did you believe what your country taught you? About being American? About freedom and equality?" Sam considered the question carefully. "I believed what my mother taught me. She said America promised equality but did not deliver it. She said we had to fight for every small freedom. She said the Constitution was beautiful, but white people only applied it to themselves." "Your mother sounds wise." "She cleaned white people's houses. She rode the back of the bus. She used separate water fountains. But she made sure I learned to read. She made sure I understood history. She wanted me to have choices she never had." Aya heard the pain beneath his words. "In Japan, my father wanted me to be teacher. Safe job, respectable. But I wanted to help people. I became nurse. He was proud, but also afraid. He said war was coming and nurses would be needed." She paused. "He was right about war. I wonder if he knows I am alive. If he received notification I was captured."
The Red Cross sends notifications. Your family knows you are a prisoner. They know you are alive." This information surprised her. "Americans tell families that prisoners live?" "Yes. Geneva Convention requires it. We report all prisoners. Your father knows." Aya felt tears threatening. She had assumed her family believed her dead. The thought that her father knew she was alive, that he was waiting for her return, was almost too much to bear. Sam saw her struggling with emotion. He moved closer, still maintaining proper distance, but near enough that his presence was comforting. War separates us from everyone we love, makes us into different people than we were. Your father will understand that when you return home." "Will I return home? Or will I die here?" "You will return. Japan cannot fight forever. When the war ends, prisoners will be repatriated. You will see your father again." "How can you know this?" "Because America has too many prisoners to keep forever. Because the Geneva Convention requires repatriation. Because the war will end, and life
Will continue." He paused. "And because I believe people deserve to go home." They talked for an hour, sharing stories about their childhoods. Aya described Osaka before the war, the festivals, the cherry blossoms, the crowds in the streets. Sam described Birmingham, the segregated neighborhoods, the jazz clubs, the churches where his people found community and strength. "You speak of your people as separate," Aya observed. "Not as Americans, as black people. As if you are nation within nation." "That is exactly what we are. America contains many nations. Black America, white America, rich America, poor America. We share geography, but not experience." "In Japan, we are taught that we are one people, one nation, one purpose." "Is that true?" Aya thought about the class differences in Japan, about the discrimination against Koreans and Chinese, about how the military treated civilians. "No, it is not true. We also have divisions, but we pretend unity." "Everyone pretends. Propaganda requires it." Private Jenkins appeared from the darkness, coughing loudly to announce his presence. "Turner, Sergeant Rawlings is starting his rounds. You need to finish up here." Sam nodded. He looked at Aya one last time. "Get inside. Stay warm." "Thank you for talking with me." "Thank you for listening." Aya returned to the barracks, her mind full of Sam's stories. She thought about his mother, cleaning white people's houses while teaching her son to read. She thought about his description of segregated Birmingham, a city divided by invisible lines that everyone observed. She thought about how he spoke of America with both love and pain, loyalty and disappointment. The conversation had revealed something crucial. Sam was as much a prisoner of his society as Aya was a prisoner of this camp. His chains were invisible, but just as real. He served a country that denied him equality. He wore a uniform that did not protect him from hatred. And yet, he chose kindness. He chose to treat enemy prisoners with dignity. He chose to see their humanity, despite everything his country had taught him about Japanese people being less than human. That night, Mitsuko asked what she and Sam had discussed. "Everything," Aya said. "We talked about everything except the war." October 23, 1944. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Aya had been planning the escape for 11 days, not because she believed it would succeed, not because she had anywhere to go, but because remaining passive felt like surrendering something essential. She was a soldier. Soldiers did not accept captivity without resistance. The opportunity came during a work detail. 6 prisoners were assigned to collect firewood from the forest edge. The guards were understaffed that day. Most personnel were processing a new group of German prisoners from the European theater. The supervision was minimal. Aya waited until the guard turned his back, then slipped into the tree line. She had no plan beyond running. No map, no supplies, no understanding of Wisconsin geography. She knew only that Camp McCoy was somewhere in the northern United States, surrounded by forests and farms. She knew that winter was coming. She knew that escape was probably suicide. She ran anyway. The forest was dense, already showing autumn colors. Aya moved quickly, trying to put distance between herself and the camp. She had perhaps 30 minutes before the count revealed her missing. Perhaps an hour before search parties were organized. Every minute counted. She heard the pursuit after 20 minutes. Dogs barking, men shouting, vehicles moving along camp roads. The American military machine responding with the efficiency she had come to expect. They would find her. The only question was when. Sam found her first. He appeared from behind a large oak tree blocking her path. He was not armed. He had left his rifle with another guard. He stood with his hands visible, his expression carefully neutral. "Aya, stop running." She stopped, breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. "I cannot be prisoner forever. I cannot accept this." "I know." "You must report me. I must be punished. This is regulation." "Yes, that is regulation." Sam moved closer, slowly, as if approaching something wounded and dangerous. "But first, you will sit. You will breathe. You will let me understand why you ran." "Why does it matter?" "Because I need to know if you ran to escape or ran to die." The question struck her like a physical blow. She sank to the ground, her back against a tree, and finally admitted the truth. "I do not know. Both, perhaps. I am so tired of pretending, of being strong, of watching my country lose this war and knowing there is nothing I can do." Sam sat several feet away, maintaining distance but offering presence. "Japan is losing?" "Yes. Everyone knows. The prisoners receive letters from home. The news is carefully censored, but we understand. Japan is being pushed back. Cities are being bombed. The military is desperate." She wiped her face. "We were taught that Japanese spirit would overcome American material. We were told that our willingness to die would defeat your unwillingness to sacrifice. But you have both material and spirit. You win because you have everything." "Winning the war does not mean we are right about everything." "Does it matter? Victory writes the history." Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised them both. "My grandmother was a slave. She was born on a plantation in Alabama in 1859. She lived through slavery, through the Civil War, through Reconstruction, through Jim Crow. She died in 1938. I was 16. Before she died, she told me that losing is not the same as being wrong. She said her people lost every battle for 100 years, but were right about deserving freedom. Victory is not the same as justice." "Your country freed the slaves, but kept them enslaved through other means?" "Yes. We got legal freedom, but not actual equality. The chains became invisible, but remained real." Aya understood what he was offering, a different way of seeing defeat,
a way to survive loss without surrendering dignity or truth. His grandmother's story suggested that losing a war did not mean accepting the victor's complete narrative. "I cannot go back to camp," Aya said quietly. "They will punish me, lock me in isolation, mark me as dangerous." "They will. That is the consequence of running." "Then why did you come alone? Why not bring other guards?" Sam looked at her directly. "Because I wanted to give you these 5 minutes. 5 minutes to sit in this forest and breathe air that does not smell like the camp. 5 minutes to remember you are a person, not just a prisoner. 5 minutes to make peace with going back." "That is against regulations." "Yes, it is." They sat in silence, listening to the forest sounds, birds calling, wind moving through leaves, the distant noise of search parties. The moment felt suspended outside of time, outside of war, outside of the rules that governed their normal interaction. Finally, Aya stood. "I am ready. Take me back." Sam stood as well. "I will report that I found you quickly, that you came willingly, that there was no violence or resistance. That will reduce your punishment." "Why do you help me?" "Because you ran to prove you were still a soldier. You ran to resist. I understand that need. In your position, I would have done the same thing." They walked back together, prisoner and guard, enemies who had found unexpected understanding. When they emerged from the forest, other guards were waiting. There were questions, forms to fill out, statements to record. Aya was placed in isolation for 72 hours, restricted rations, no recreation time, no communication with other prisoners. The punishment was mild by military standards, but still difficult. She spent the time thinking about Sam's grandmother, about losing battles while remaining right, about how defeat did not require accepting the enemy's complete narrative. When she emerged from isolation, Sam was waiting. He said nothing, simply handed her a blanket and walked away. But the gesture said everything. He had not abandoned her. He had not changed his opinion of her. He still saw her as a person worthy of dignity. That kindness, offered after she had violated regulations and caused problems, meant more than all the previous gestures combined. It suggested that Sam's mercy was not conditional on her compliance. It was given freely, even when she failed. November 2nd, 1944, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The first snow of the season fell during morning roll call, transforming the prison camp into something almost beautiful. Aya stood in formation, watching white flakes accumulate on the parade ground, and tried to reconcile the growing disconnect between her training and her experience. Mitsuko stood beside her, still recovering from pneumonia but strong enough to return to regular duty. She had changed during her time in the hospital. The anger that had sustained her through the first months of captivity had softened into something more complex, something that looked almost like doubt. "They gave me medicine that costs more than my father earns in a month," Mitsuko whispered during the count. "The doctor said they could not let me die, because every life has value, even enemy lives. He said this is what separates America from Japan, that America believes in human dignity regardless of nationality." "Do you believe him?" "I do not know what to believe anymore." The work assignments had expanded as winter approached. Prisoners were employed in the camp laundry, the kitchens, the administrative offices. The labor was required under Geneva Convention guidelines, but the treatment during work exceeded minimum standards. Prisoners received the same breaks as American staff, the same safety equipment, the same basic respect. Aya had been assigned to the camp library, helping catalog and organize materials. The American librarian, Mrs. Helen Kowalski, was a civilian employee in her 50s.
She treated Aya as an assistant, not a prisoner. She said please and thank you. She asked Aya's opinion on organization systems. She shared stories about her own life. "My parents came from Poland," Mrs. Kowalski said one afternoon. 1907. They spoke no English, they had no money. America gave them a chance to build a new life. That is what America means to me. The possibility of beginning again. Aya listened to these stories, trying to understand a country so confident in its values that it could treat enemies as potential future citizens. This long-term thinking contradicted everything she knew about warfare. Wars were supposed to create permanent divisions. Enemies were supposed to remain enemies forever. But the Americans seemed to view war as a temporary condition. They planned for peace. They prepared for reconciliation. They treated prisoners in ways that suggested they believed those prisoners would eventually return home and remember how they were treated. The strategic logic was sound. If you wanted to convert enemies into future allies, you needed to demonstrate that your system was worth joining. But the strategy required believing that the war would end, that normal life would resume, that people could move beyond hatred. One evening, Aya found herself in conversation with Dorothy, the American nurse who had spoken to her earlier. Dorothy brought news from the Pacific Theater. American forces had invaded the Philippines. Japanese resistance was fierce, but ultimately futile. The military situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Your country is losing," Dorothy said gently. "But losing the war does not mean losing everything. After Germany surrenders, they will need to rebuild. After Japan surrenders, the same. America will help both countries. We do not want permanent enemies. We want stable, peaceful nations." "How can you help a nation that attacked you?" "Because continuing to fight after the war ends benefits no one. Because we want to prove that democracy works better than imperialism. Because your children and our children should not inherit our hatreds." This concept of generational thinking challenged Aya's understanding. In Japan, revenge was honorable. Blood debts passed from parent to child. Enemies remained enemies across centuries. But Dorothy spoke of deliberately breaking those cycles, of choosing to end hatred rather than perpetuate it. That night, Aya raised these ideas with Mitsuko. "What if the Americans are right? What if continuing to hate them only hurts us? Betraying our country helps no one. Is it betrayal to acknowledge reality? Japan is losing. We will return home to a defeated nation. We will need to rebuild. If America offers help, should we refuse out of pride?" Mitsuko was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "Before the war, I hated Chinese. I hated Koreans. I believed Japan was superior to all other Asian nations. The military taught us this. The newspapers repeated it. Everyone accepted it as truth." She paused. "But in the hospital here, I saw the American doctor treat everyone equally. Japanese prisoners, German prisoners, American staff. He made no distinctions based on race or nationality. He simply treated illness. That equality felt wrong at first. Then I realized it felt wrong because I had been taught that equality was weakness, that hierarchy was natural, that some people deserved less than others." "You are saying the propaganda lied?" "I am saying the propaganda taught us to see people as categories instead of individuals. It taught us that Japanese lives matter more than other lives. It taught us that dying for the emperor was more important than living for our families. It taught us many things that seemed true until I saw an alternative." These conversations spread through the barracks. 47 women processing impossible truths. Gradually, the collective mindset shifted. The anger remained, but it was no longer directed at their captors. Instead, it turned inward, questioning the system that had sent them to war unprepared and unsupported. Keiko Yamada articulated what many felt. I was told America was weak and decadent. I was told Americans would crumble under pressure. Instead, they built an empire of production. They fed us better than our own government fed its soldiers. They gave us medicine our hospitals could not provide. They treated us with more dignity than our officers showed their own enlisted personnel. Every promise Tokyo made was a lie. Every warning about America proved false. This recognition spread like infection. The cognitive dissonance between propaganda and reality was destroying loyalty from within. The women were not becoming pro-American. They were becoming anti-propaganda. They were learning to trust their own observations over received narratives. Aya saw this transformation in herself. She no longer viewed Sam as an exception. She saw him as representative of values that America claimed to hold. She saw those values imperfectly applied, contradicted by racism and inequality. But she also saw them genuinely believed and occasionally achieved. Most importantly, she learned that people could hold contradictory truths simultaneously. Sam could be a good man serving a flawed country. America could be both racist and capable of treating enemies with dignity. Japan could be both her homeland and the source of propaganda that nearly destroyed her. These nuances were uncomfortable. They required accepting that nothing was simple, that enemies could have virtues, that allies could have flaws, that right and wrong were not absolute categories, but complex spectrums requiring constant evaluation. November 14, 1944. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Captain William Hayes arrived for his monthly inspection of the women's compound at precisely 8 in the morning. He was a career officer, 43 years old, with a reputation for strict adherence to regulations. He did not believe in fraternization. He did not believe in treating prisoners as anything more than problems requiring efficient management. Sam stood at attention during the inspection, watching Captain Hayes move through the compound with barely contained disapproval. The captain examined every detail: barracks cleanliness, work assignments, recreation schedules, food provisions. He found fault with numerous small items, not enough to require disciplinary action, but enough to establish his authority. "Sergeant Turner," Hayes said finally, "walk with me." They moved to the perimeter fence, away from the prisoners. Hayes turned to face Sam directly, his expression hard. "I have received reports that you are too friendly with the prisoners, that you provide extra supplies, that you engage in personal conversations, that you show favoritism. Is this accurate?" "I follow Geneva Convention protocols, sir. I ensure prisoners receive adequate care and supplies. I respond to questions when asked." "That is not what I asked. Are you fraternizing with enemy prisoners?" Sam chose his words carefully. "I treat prisoners with dignity, as required by military regulations and international law." Dignity does not require friendship. It does not require personal conversations. It does not require distributing your own rations to prisoners who are already adequately fed. "The prisoners are people, sir. Treating them humanely seems appropriate for soldiers representing American values." Hayes's face darkened. "You are a soldier of the United States Army. Your job is to guard prisoners, not befriend them. You are particularly unsuited for making distinctions about American values, given your background." The racism was barely disguised. Sam felt the familiar anger rising, but forced it down. He had survived Birmingham by learning when to fight and when to endure. This moment required endurance. "I follow regulations, sir. If my performance is unsatisfactory, I request formal charges be filed so I can defend my record." Hayes studied him for a long moment. "No charges. Yet. But I am assigning Lieutenant Patterson to supervise this compound. You will report to him daily. Any deviation from strict protocols will result in immediate disciplinary action. Am I clear?" "Yes, sir." Hayes left. Sam returned to his duties, knowing that everything had changed. Lieutenant Patterson was notorious for harsh treatment of prisoners. He believed the Geneva Convention was weak and that prisoners should be managed through fear and deprivation. He particularly disliked black soldiers serving in any position of authority. The new regime began immediately. Patterson arrived that afternoon and implemented changes. Recreation time reduced. Extra supplies forbidden. Personal conversations between guards and prisoners prohibited. Work assignments increased. The camp remained within legal guidelines, but the atmosphere transformed from firm but fair to coldly correct. Sam watched the changes with growing frustration. He saw prisoners who had begun to trust their captors retreat back into fear. He saw Mitsuko stop asking for medical supplies she needed. He saw Aya avoid eye contact during roll call. He saw the fragile bridge of understanding being systematically destroyed. Private Leroy Jenkins found him that evening. "Man, Patterson is bad news. Word is he requested this assignment specifically to put you in your place. He does not like black soldiers having any authority." "Then I will prove he is wrong about me." "By doing what? Following his orders will undo everything you have built here. These women are starting to see Americans as human. Patterson will teach them we are exactly what their propaganda claimed." Sam knew Leroy was right. But disobeying direct orders meant court-martial. It meant the end of his military career. It meant confirming every racist assumption about black soldiers being unreliable and undisciplined. The crisis came 3 days later. An elderly prisoner, sick with influenza, requested additional blankets. Patterson denied the request, claiming she had adequate bedding. Sam knew the barracks were cold, knew the woman was at risk, knew that denying basic medical comfort violated both regulations and decency. He retrieved extra blankets from the supply room without authorization. He delivered them to the sick prisoner. He filed a report documenting the temperature in the barracks and the medical necessity of additional warming. Patterson filed charges of insubordination. The hearing was scheduled for November 20th. Sam would face formal discipline, possibly reduction in rank, possibly dishonorable discharge. His career hung on a decision about blankets. Aya heard about the charges through the camp gossip network. She asked to testify, claiming she had witnessed the incident. Her request was denied. Prisoners could not testify on behalf of guards. But she filed a written statement describing the conditions in the barracks and Sam's professionalism in addressing them. Mitsuko and 16 other prisoners filed similar statements. They described Sam's consistent adherence to regulations, his respectful treatment, his attention to prisoner welfare. They argued that his actions represented the best of American values, not a violation of military discipline. The hearing became something unexpected. Instead of a simple insubordination case, it became a referendum on prisoner treatment. Colonel Harrison, presiding over the hearing, read every prisoner's statement carefully. He questioned Patterson about why medical supplies were denied. He reviewed camp temperature logs and medical protocols. Finally, he rendered his decision. Sergeant Turner acted within his authority to ensure prisoner health and safety. The charges are dismissed. Lieutenant Patterson is reassigned to administrative duties.
Sergeant Turner will resume his position as senior guard for the women's compound. Sam left the hearing room to find Aya waiting outside, technically violating regulations by being there. She said nothing, simply met his eyes with an expression that communicated everything words could not. He had risked his career for prisoners, for enemies, for people his country said did not deserve equal consideration. He had chosen compassion over compliance. And somehow, impossibly, he had won. That night, Sam sat alone, thinking about what had happened. He had been prepared to sacrifice everything for principle. The prisoners had defended him despite having no obligation and no hope of personal gain. Together, they had proved that human decency could transcend nationality, race, and the divisions that war created. The battle was small, the victory temporary. But it mattered. It mattered because it demonstrated that individuals could choose kindness even when systems encouraged cruelty. It mattered because 47 Japanese women and 1 Black American soldier had stood together against injustice and won. It mattered because it gave everyone involved hope that better futures were possible. Chapter 11. November 28, 1944. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The first real winter storm arrived during evening roll call, wind driving snow horizontally across the parade ground. Aya stood in formation, her body numb from cold, but her mind sharp with recognition. This moment felt significant. Like everything that had happened since September was leading to this conversation she needed to have. Sam found her after lights out, standing at the barracks window, watching snow accumulate. He should not have been there. Regulations prohibited guards from entering prisoner barracks, except during emergencies. But something in her posture suggested an emergency of a different kind. "You should not be here," Aya said, without turning. "I know. We could both be punished." "I know that too." She turned to face him. The dim light from the hallway cast shadows across his features. She realized she had memorized his face during these months. The careful expression he wore like armor, the sadness that lived behind his eyes, the kindness that emerged despite everything working against it. "I need to tell you something," Aya said. "Something I have been avoiding because saying it makes it real." "Tell me." "When I arrived here in September, I believed I was dead. I believed my life had ended with capture. I believed the propaganda that said Americans would torture me, violate me, kill me slowly. I was prepared for that fate, almost welcomed it, because dying as a soldier seemed better than surviving as a traitor." Sam listened without interrupting. "But you gave me water. You caught me when I fell. You treated me like a person instead of an enemy. And that kindness was more terrifying than expected brutality, because it meant everything Tokyo taught me was wrong. If the propaganda lied about American cruelty, what else was false?" "Everything," Sam said quietly. "All propaganda is lies built on fragments of truth." "I have been resisting this understanding, clinging to my identity as a Japanese soldier, as someone loyal to the emperor, as someone who hates the enemy. But I do not hate you. I cannot hate you. And that realization is destroying everything I thought I knew about myself." Aya felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. "You are supposed to be a monster. Black, American, enemy. Everything my country taught me to despise. But you are the kindest person I have ever met. You risk your career to protect prisoners. You share your food with hungry women. You treat us with dignity when regulations only require you to treat us correctly. Please, let me finish. She took a breath. I no longer know what to believe. About Japan, about America, about the war, about myself. The only truth I can hold is this. You showed me that enemies can be human, that kindness is not weakness, that choosing compassion over hatred is the bravest thing a person can do. Sam moved closer, still maintaining the distance regulations required, but near enough that she could see his expression clearly. I need to tell you something too. Something I have been avoiding because it complicates everything. Tell me. When you said you had not had sex in 6 months, that you felt isolated and alone, it broke something open in me. I recognized that loneliness. I understood that hunger for human connection. And I realized we were both prisoners. You behind these fences, me behind the color of my skin. He paused, choosing words carefully. I was taught that Japanese people were less than human, that you were fanatics who deserved no mercy. The newsreels showed only brutality. The propaganda made you into monsters. But then I met you, scared, lonely, trying to maintain dignity in impossible circumstances, and I saw myself. How? Because white America looks at me the same way your propaganda taught you to look at Americans, as something dangerous, something less than fully human, something that needs to be controlled, contained, separated from decent society. I understood your propaganda because I live with similar lies every day. Aya absorbed this slowly. So we are both prisoners of systems that deny our humanity? Yes. And showing kindness to each other is resistance against those systems? Yes. They stood in silence, processing what they had admitted. The vulnerability they had shared created a bond that transcended regulations and propriety. They had acknowledged their connection, given it words, made it real. What happens now? Aya asked. The war will end. You will return to Japan. I will return to Birmingham. We will probably never see each other again. That is not what I am asking. Sam understood. What happens now is we carry this forward. You take what you learned here back to Japan. I take what I learned back to America. We prove that understanding between enemies is possible. That choosing compassion over hatred changes people. That these months mattered. They mattered, Aya whispered. You mattered. You changed everything for me. You changed everything for me, too. Sam left before anyone discovered his violation of regulations, but the conversation remained, suspended in the cold Wisconsin air, proof that two people from opposite sides of the world had found connection despite everything working against it. That night, Aya lay awake, thinking about transformation. She had arrived believing she was dead. She was leaving, knowing she was alive in ways she had never been before. August 17th, 1945, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The war ended 2 days earlier. Japan had surrendered after atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The radio had announced Emperor Hirohito's speech, his voice breaking with emotion as he told his people the war was lost. Aya had listened with tears streaming down her face, mourning not just her country's defeat, but the end of the world she had known. Now she stood in the compound,
waiting for the final roll call as a prisoner of war. The repatriation would begin in September. Ships would carry them back to Japan, back to a homeland she barely remembered, back to a father who had waited 3 years for her return. Sam found her during the afternoon recreation period. They had not spoken privately since November. Regulations had tightened as the war reached its conclusion, but now, with peace declared, some rules felt less important than closure. "How are you?" he asked. "I do not know how to answer that question." Aya looked at the sky, cloudless and blue. "My country is defeated. My emperor surrendered. Everything I believed about Japanese superiority was proven false. But I am alive. I will return home. I will see my father again. So I am sad and grateful simultaneously." That seems reasonable. "Is it true about the atomic bombs? Cities destroyed in single explosions?" "Yes, it is true." "Then America had this power all along? This ability to destroy entire cities, but chose to wait?" Sam had no good answer. "I do not know why the bombs were not used earlier. I do not know if using them at all was right. I only know that the war is over, and you will go home alive." They walked along the fence line, maintaining proper distance, aware that their conversation was being watched but no longer caring. The end of war created space for honesty that combat did not allow. "I want to thank you," Aya said, "for showing me that kindness is not weakness, that enemies can recognize each other's humanity, that propaganda only works until you actually meet the people you are supposed to hate." "You do not need to thank me." "Yes, I do. Because you risked everything to treat us with dignity. You disobeyed orders to bring blankets to sick prisoners. You defended us when Captain Hayes wanted to punish us for being human. You showed me that one person choosing compassion can challenge an entire system built on hatred." Sam stopped walking. "I want to tell you something about the future, about what will happen when you return to Japan." "Tell me." "Your country is destroyed. Cities burned, industry ruined, millions dead. You will face hunger, hardship, occupation by American forces. It will be terrible." He paused. "But America will help rebuild. We will provide food, medicine, resources. We will help create a new government, a democracy. Because we do not want permanent enemies. We want stable, peaceful nations." "Why? Why help a nation that attacked you?" "Because my grandmother was right. Victory is not the same as justice. We won the war, but that does not mean we are right about everything. Helping defeated nations rebuild is how we prove our system works better than fascism or imperialism. It is how we break cycles of revenge that create new wars." Aya understood what he was offering. Hope. The possibility that defeat was not the end of everything. That her country could rise from ashes and build something better than what existed before. "Will you remember me?" she asked. "When you return to Birmingham?" "Always. You showed me that the enemy had a face, a name, a father waiting at home. You made the war personal in ways that changed how I see the world." "I will remember you too. The black soldier who treated Japanese prisoners with more dignity than our own officers showed their troops. The man who proved that kindness transcends race and nationality." They stood in silence, watching the sun sink toward the Wisconsin horizon. The moment felt suspended between past and future, between war and peace, between enemies and something more complicated than friendship, but equally important. "I hope your life is good," Sam said finally. I hope Japan rebuilds into something worth being proud of. I hope you find peace.
I hope your life is good too. I hope America gives you the equality you deserve. I hope you find the freedom you fought for. The final roll call came at sunset. 47 Japanese women standing in formation one last time as prisoners. Tomorrow, they would begin the journey home. Tomorrow, they would stop being enemies and become citizens of a defeated nation needing to rebuild. But tonight, they were still prisoners, still under American authority, still witnesses to a truth that propaganda could not contain. That people on opposite sides of war could recognize each other's humanity and be transformed by that recognition. Aya returned to the barracks, packed her few possessions, and wrote a letter she would never send. It described everything she had learned, everything Sam had taught her, everything that changed when kindness replaced hatred. 20 years later, in 1965, Aya Takahashi stood before a conference on peace and reconciliation in Tokyo. She spoke about her experience as a prisoner of war, about the Black American soldier who treated her with dignity, about how one person's compassion had changed her understanding of enemies and allies. Sam Turner, watching the speech on television in Birmingham, recognized her immediately. He was 43 now, a civil rights activist, a veteran, a man who had spent 20 years fighting for equality in America while carrying memories of a Wisconsin prison camp where he learned that all oppression was connected. Their paths had diverged, but the transformation remained. Two people from opposite sides of the world, divided by war and propaganda, who found connection through shared humanity. Their story proved that even in history's darkest moments, individuals could choose kindness over hatred and be forever changed by that choice. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.